right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Twins Talk Therapy. I'm Adam Goodrich.
And I'm Aaron Goodrich.
And today's topic, we're talking about Damar Hamlin's episode that he suffered an injury on Monday Night Football last night, January 2nd. And we want to start this episode first and foremost by praying for Damar and his family. We hope that he can come through this, and we know the situation is critical, but we really just want to send prayers out to him and his family in this time.
Absolutely. I mean, just the nature of the injury. We rarely see something of this, this serious of an injury. Even in the sport of football, you have some significant injuries like, ACL ruptures and broken bones and severe head injuries, concussions. But anytime CPR is starting to be administered with an athlete on the field, I myself, as an athletic trainer, hope I never have to experience that. And I have not in my 9.5 years so far as an athletic trainer. And we hope we never experience it, any athletic trainer, but that's kind of what our training is for us to be able to help those athletes no matter the situation. So.
Well, yeah, and I just wanted to say that in our first video, I had mentioned one of the topics we might be covering, given Aaron, that you're an athletic trainer, is sports injuries, prevention and or recovery. And this was kind of the situation I was thinking about when I mentioned that. I had thought about it in a way of, if you see your favorite player wearing a brace or something, we could go into why that would be. But this was also obviously a situation I had thought of, and it came up last night in a big way. But when you have someone injured on a screen that millions of people are watching, has captured everyone's attention today, and we kind of wanted to just provide some information. This is what this channel is about, is to inform the public. So we're not trying to ride a wave of this guy's injury whatsoever. We're just wanting to let people know who might have a lot of questions, because everyone's going to be hearing about this and everyone's going to be concerned, and they want to know what exactly happened, what's going on. We're going to do our best to inform what we believe happened. And we're not going to make any 100% claims here today, but we're just wanting to give you all some information about what more than likely happened. So, Aaron, I'm going to be asking you questions because this is your wheelhouse. This is your world. You're going to know more than me about all this stuff. So I'm just going to ask you questions and we'll listen to you. But the first thing I wanted to go into is, when something happens like what happened last night, when a player just drops like that after a hit, and you're on the sideline as an athletic trainer and you have the other medical personnel around you, what is the response going to be? What is your concern? What are you thinking when you're running out onto the field? What are you checking for? And just give us maybe a minute or two here of what that situation is like as an athletic trainer.
Yeah, so anytime an athlete drops, in the instance of Damar Hamlin, first of all, seeing the replay, if there were eyes on him from the sideline with the medical personnel, they would have recognized this as a pretty drastic concern, like a drastic injury, because clearly there was some LOC, or loss of consciousness. But if there were not eyes on the field, which likely at the NFL level, some member of the medical team had eyes on the field.
And they have spotters.
Yes,
up in the box and
NFL
stuff.
has spotters, and mainly for these head injuries that occur. But there's a clear emergency occurring, so medical personnel rushed out there pretty quickly. Now, what most of the viewers, including myself, I was tuned into the game and watching it. I did not see the CPR that was taking place rather immediately. I know that they went to spine board him, but they quickly reverted course to administering CPR. So when the commentators or the on-field broadcaster or whoever it was at first stated that there was a CPR being administered, that instantly switches to like a life and death type of situation. Which, as soon as I heard that, my heart kind of sunk, because you know that CPR is a life-saving technique that's implemented. So this wasn't an injury. This wasn't a loss of consciousness from a head injury. This was the athlete has stopped breathing and the heart has stopped beating. So they're in life-saving mode. They're not in, protect the athlete and get them off the field mode. I mean, this is dire situation. So you get to the injured athlete, you check for consciousness. You once you see that they're unconscious, you look, listen, and feel for breathing and for a heart rhythm by checking airway, breathing, and circulation, either by the carotid artery here on the neck or down at the radial artery at the wrist. And you kind of have to listen, by the athlete's head to see if you can hear breath sounds, or if you can visualize the chest rising up and down. But in that case, obviously, if that's not present, then you need to start administering CPR.
Okay. And now I have seen a lot of medical personnel online just in the last 6 hours using the frame Commotio Cordis. They or the phrase Commotio Cordis, and as a likely condition that Damar suffered, and that's what led to what happened in the aftermath. I had to look it up to see what it was, but I did recognize what it was after reading the definition. I realized I had heard of that situation before. So just give our viewers a definition of Commotio Cordis and just a quick explanation of what that is.
Yeah. So first off, my initial thought when seeing how he lost consciousness and he had stood up, but quickly fell down to the field, was I was worried about a cervical spine injury and a potential injury to the vertebral artery, which you have one on each side of the neck that goes up, and that's what feeds the blood and oxygen to the brain. So that's what my initial thought was, and the reason is that Commotio cordis is not something that occurs with full-grown adults very often. However, it is possible just based on the velocity of the blow. So that's what some doctors and stuff have been speculating that Damar Hamlin has suffered. But I don't think at this point anything has been confirmed. But Commotio cordis is typically common in those preteen to teenage years, and it's common in sports such as football, lacrosse, and baseball. And it's typically that age range, probably between 11 to 15 years of age. And that's because, the athletes are starting to develop some pretty high velocity with throwing either the lacrosse ball with the stick or pitching the baseball from the mound. And the condition occurs when there's a direct blow to the chest wall, typically around the sternum, and in particular, if it's more so right over the left ventricle. So you've got 4 chambers of your heart, 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The ventricles are larger, and that's what pumps blood away from the heart and into the rest of the body. So in Commotio cordis, the subject is going into ventricular fibrillation, which means fibrillate just means to like quiver. So instead of the heart pumping from the top, the atrium into the ventricle, so it's like a bump, 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 or a lub dub, you might hear it described as. So it's kind of lub dub, and those ventricles are bigger chambers, and they squeeze with more force, where the atria are just pushing blood from the atria down into the ventricles. And so there's an electrical heart rhythm that occurs naturally versus the SA node and AV node in our heart. There's like a depolarization and a repolarization. So the repolarization occurs, and then right at the moment of like a climax or the T wave, you've got depolarization, where it basically gives that electrical shock to the ventricles to contract. That ball basically, think about if you're trying to yawn or sneeze and someone scares you and it kind of jumps you out of doing that. Well, that's what happens with the heart. With that blow to the chest and the ventricles, basically, they go to deliver that shock to from the node to cause the ventricular contraction, but it's interrupted. And so now the heart rhythm itself is interrupted. And so the heart is more doing like a quivering rather than doing a pump from the atrium to the ventricles and out to the rest of the body. And it happens within a second. So the fact that this blow has to occur at during the upslope of the T wave or at the apex of the T wave in order for that to cause ventricular fibrillation. So you're talking milliseconds and just crazy wrong place, wrong time for Damar Hamlin, especially being a full grown man. And this happened. So obviously the hit that Taye Diggs laid on him was enough to cause this ventricular fibrillation. And that usually occurs at around 50 joules or about 40 miles per hour is what it takes to cause ventricular fibrillation.
Okay. And obviously we are not saying that this is for sure what happened to Damar, but we're just giving an explanation of Commotio Cordis, because there's a lot of professionals saying that that likely might be what happened to him. And that ventricle fibrillation, that quivering of the ventricles, and it interrupts the strong contraction. That's why I think he sustained the hit and then he got up and it seemed all was well, but it takes that quivering of the ventricles. They're not getting a good contraction, and then that's when it takes a few seconds for the body's system to react to the lack of blood flow or a rhythmic heart beat. And so you see him get up like everything was okay, and then you could tell he kind of felt it and then he dropped. And so that's why a lot of people are saying that looks like what happened. But we just want to as a disclaimer, say that we're not trying to diagnose what happened to him. Lastly, before we end this video, I just kind of want to get into like treatment post an incident like this, like a status post Commotio Cordis incident. We know from the latest reports, we're doing this video at just after 2 p.m. today. I've heard that he's intubated at the hospital and sedated. So kind of like a low line, a coma, induced a coma. We're praying for him, hoping he pulls through here. And if they bring him out of the coma or the sedation, and they can remove this tube because he makes it through these initial days here, what would be, in your experience, the treatment going forward? Or if that's not your wheelhouse, we don't have to get into that too much, but that's my last question for you, Aaron.
Yeah, no. So, a little more on Commotio Cordis before I address that question is when I was in grad school, getting my athletic training degree, the professors discussed that the way they kind of figured out what type of velocity in the 50 joule terminology is just a measure of energy in terms with velocity and that type of thing. So they scientists and researchers wanted to study, what kind of velocity causes that. So the way they did that, it sounds fairly sadistic, but sometimes research calls for that type of thing to be done in the name of science, unfortunately. But they would string up pigs and use like a pitching machine to launch projectiles, or like a baseball or a lacrosse ball, and just kind of see what velocity and what type of exertion of energy was required to cause ventricular fibrillation. And so they would basically initiate ventricular fibrillation on the pig. And then the way you break that is by delivering electrical shock to put the heart back in rhythm. So they would essentially use an AED or an electrical shock and restart the pig's heart. So in the instance of Damar Hamlin, in order to get his heart back in rhythm and to get it beating properly again, In addition to CPR, they likely had to administer an AED, which is on automated external defibrillator. So right in the name, it's defibrillating the heart or taking away that quivering rhythm and putting it back into a natural heart rhythm. So AEDs, that's why that's so important to have those readily accessible on at any sporting event, on any sideline, and even in workplaces. You see them on the wall and you may not know what they do. So a side note, just to stress the importance of getting certified in CPR and AED use and first aid, because anybody can help save a life in that instance. But as far as the treatment, that would be the initial treatment, is to deliver a shock to the heart to put it back in rhythm, and then you're going to have to monitor the athlete or the individual that may have suffered this type of injury. Historically speaking, sadly, the Commotio Cordis has, a relatively low survival rate. And I don't know if it's just because of the difficulty that once the shock is delivered, if the heart has a harder time picking up its normal rhythm versus like a heart attack where the heart just stops beating. Once it gets a delivered shock, it can just resume beating, and it was never knocked out of rhythm per se. So as far as treatment for him, that's what I had heard as well, Adam, is that he was sedated, that he was on a breathing tube. So they're likely going to monitor and hopefully get him out of that. And then from there, I would think that they're going to screen him for any potential pre-existing conditions that may have been undetected. Maybe he had a heart defect or something.
Because
And
the
so,
hit didn't look that severe. It wasn't like the hardest, most high speed, violent hit that we've seen by any means. So I had heard too that the potential, and again, we're not diagnosing Damar, but if he had an underlying heart condition that was unknown, which these guys are screened and tested for that anymore. So hopefully that was not the case. But if he had suffered anything, even the post-COVID issues affecting people's hearts and circulatory systems, we know this long hauler COVID stuff is a thing. Could have been. There's all kinds of things that could have happened that it didn't take as hard of a hit as it normally would to get the Commotio Cordis event. But with that, if you have anything else to say, go ahead and wrap it up here, because it looks like we're getting close to our time limit. So
yeah, I don't think really anything else to add. Obviously, like we had mentioned, several times already, that a lot of this, as far as his exact condition, is speculation at this time. So as far as, the probable underlying causes of this to happen, it's all speculation, and nothing is verified, but there's things that could kind of make more sense as to why this type of hit happened. And that's why you see, it wasn't hard enough a hit for him to lose consciousness immediately. He was able to stand back up, and it appeared to be okay, and then dropped within a moment, because essentially his blood pressure went to zero because the heart stopped beating. So we just pray for him. All our thoughts are with him. We're hoping for a successful turnout and a full recovery. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about this condition, you can shoot them our way. And hopefully the next video is something more pre-planned out, and doesn't take the backseat to something as emergent situation that happened last night with Damar Hamlin. But
yeah, our thoughts and prayers with him. And we're just here again to inform. And it feels a little awkward saying this, given the gravity of the situation. But if you guys could like, share, and subscribe these videos, we just like to get, I think, people being informed in retrospect after these events can give people a little bit more peace of mind, because like I said, a lot of people, millions of people viewed this, and some people kind of traumatized by it, by seeing this. But just having a little bit of information can calm people down. So that's what we're doing this for. So
yeah, knowledge is power at the end of the day. So this in no way tries to put the nature and the seriousness of the situation with Damar Hamlin in the back seat to, you know, the view of this video. Absolutely not. But yeah, just being educated on this type of thing is important to know going further or going forward. You know, you might help save a life or be able to recognize the situation. So yeah, give the video a like, share, subscribe, and follow us on our social channels at AMG Manual Therapy.
And Goodrich Myotherapy. And hopefully the next video won't be so somber, but stay tuned and we will see you next time.
Thanks. Have a great day.